review of the allegations and the circumstances surrounding them. From day one, this was about building a case against Governor Cuomo. The investigators, if you go through the report with a discerning eye and give it the scrutiny that it deserves, it failed to collect relevant evidence. The investigators credited people that they know had lied in the past or had motives to lie. And the report didn't explore this or any of it. This is about the veracity and the credibility of a report that is being used to impeach and take down an elected official. Let me start with some of the facts that the report got wrong, the report that the media has repeatedly credited and not bothered to present the other side. The report concluded on page 24 and on page 142, affirmatively concluded that the governor groped Ms. Camiso on November 16th of 2020. Concluded it definitively. And at the Attorney General's press conference on August 3rd, one of the investigators, Ann Clark, said it definitively to the world that Governor Cuomo groped the breast of an executive assistant in the mansion during the workday. But what was so apparent when I read the report is that the investigators didn't bother to collect or review evidence about November 16th to determine if their conclusion was correct. And everyone has to ask themselves, why didn't they do that? Why didn't they get all of the emails from that day? Why didn't they get the records about when Ms. Camiso entered and left the mansion? Why didn't they speak to any of the witnesses? And there were many who were in the mansion that day. They didn't collect the documents that proved the most serious allegation was false. Records from the mansion reflect that senior members of staff were present there on November 16th, and the investigators did not ask. They did not ask any of those people about what they saw, what they heard, what Ms. Camiso was doing that day. Her version of events, which she conveyed to the Times-Union in an April 7th anonymous interview about the amount of time that she was in the mansion and what she was in the mansion for, they don't match it up with the documentary evidence. And the investigators didn't get that. And now, we are in a situation where, as of yesterday, I read the Albany Times-Union, and it says that the governor groped her around November 25th, is what she is saying. As I've said before, my team has looked through the records for November, and we're aware of no record indicating that Brittany Camiso was at the mansion in November on any other day than November 16th. And Ms. Camiso has consistently said this occurred in November. Why did the investigators not get the records, and why did they not include them in the report? What else was so bothersome and very hard for me to take as a lawyer for the governor is that the report suggests that the governor testified falsely about that day. It suggests that when the governor said others were present, including maybe up to 10 staff members in the mansion, the report just discredited him. But I now know that they did not bother to get the records in the email that reflected who was in the mansion that day. In fact, the documents prove that the governor testified truthfully. Numerous staff were present, including Miss Melissa DeRosa, Stephanie Benton, and Peter Jimian, and the staff that is around there all throughout the day helping out with various things within the mansion. Ms. Camiso was there for 3 hours. She was there to work on a speech. She wasn't there to fix a technical issue with the governor's phone, which is what she told the Times-Union. And Ms. Camiso said that at some point during this day that the governor shut the door so hard, and then groped her, that she thought for sure someone must think, hey, what's going on? Did they hear that? The Attorney General's investigators did not ask the witnesses who were in the mansion that day about what they heard and what they saw. And during the governor's testimony on July 17th, the investigators told the governor unequivocally, that this occurred on November 16th. So why not ask the people that were there? Ask yourselves that question and whether this report was meant to be thorough and fair and to give everyone a balanced view to draw conclusions for themselves. The report also states, and the Attorney General has stated, that Ms. Camiso's claim of a sexual assault on November 16th or November 25th or what another day in November was independently corroborated. And that's not true. The only corroborated fact is that she first made her claim in March after the investigation began. The independent corroboration corroborates the governor. The simultaneous emails and documents corroborates Governor Cuomo. There was also testimony by several witnesses about potential motives and what was going on with Ms. Camiso in late 2020 and early 2021, and concerns she had about her job, that she had been turned down for a raise, and concerns that there was a possibility that because her work hours might change, she could be transferred. That was not reflected in the Attorney General's report. Another aspect to the Attorney General's report deals with a referral to the Albany Police Department about Ms. Camiso's claims. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have seen over the last several days that Ms. Camiso made a complaint to Sheriff Appel, the Albany County Sheriff. Well, what no one is talking about is that it was actually the executive chamber that referred Ms. Camiso's complaint when she first made it, when she was out with friends for drinks on March 6th, and then a lawyer called the executive chamber on Monday, March 8th. And when that lawyer called to make the allegation, the lawyer indicated that he did not want to pursue this criminally. But it was the executive chamber that referred the allegation to the Albany Police Department. And as further evidence of the bias of this report, look at page 147, buried in footnote 1,239. The report won't even credit the executive chamber for this. It said, quote, "We understand that certain criminal authorities, including the Albany Police Department, have been alerted to the most egregious allegations of physical touching, including the groping of Executive Assistant 1. I ask you, why couldn't the report say the executive chamber promptly reported it to the Albany Police Department?" And it's because every inference was going to be drawn against the executive chamber and Governor Cuomo. The report got key facts wrong, it omitted key evidence, and it failed to include witnesses whose testimony did not support the narrative that was clear that this investigation was going to weave from day one. And I want to talk about that. This began in December of 2020 with Lindsay Boylan. Lindsay Boylan made some tweets December 5th and December 13th that talked about her departure from the mansion and accused the governor of sexual harassment. One of the things that she said in an article she published on Medium in February, a couple months later, is that she was on a plane with the governor and he made a comment about, hey, let's play strict poker. There were several other staff members on the flights with Miss Boylan, and every single one of them said, that didn't happen. And after that came out that they said that didn't happen, and one of the people on the flights was Howard Zemsky, the head of the Empire State Development Agency. And he testified that he received a disparaging message from Miss Boylan that he found, quote, jarring and threatening. And the report mentions this, but they noticeably don't tell you what that message was. They don't include it as an exhibit. Why not? That is the equivalent of witness tampering. And if any member of the chamber or the governor himself had engaged in that conduct, that would be another 10 pages of the report, and I'm sure that I would have received another subpoena from the assembly. They also did not deliberately choose to investigate communications that occurred between Lindsay Boylan's campaign in December 20. She first made these allegations about 2 weeks after she announced she was running for Manhattan Borough President. And in that time period, there were communications between the Attorney General's Chief of Staff, Ibrahim Khan, and Miss Boylan's top campaign consultant, Trip Yang. There were a number of conversations about what Miss Boylan was saying and what was going on in the campaign. One of Miss Boylan's top media consultants resigned when she made these allegations. Did the Attorney General's investigators talk to all of those people, subpoena the records from the campaign in the same way that they have subpoenaed the executive chamber and my client for anything and everything having to do with the sexual harassment with Lindsay Boylan? The complainants needed to be scrutinized just as much as the governor and the chamber. And that didn't happen here. The investigators credited Lindsay Boylan, despite the fact that they knew she had threatened a witness to get him to change his story, and he did. And one thing that has been missing through this is that there was a signal about 7 or 8 months before Miss Boylan made her tweets in December, a signal that she was out for some type of revenge against the governor's office. You see, Miss Boylan had ran in a primary against Congressman Jerry Nadler. And in March of 2020, when COVID started, the governor issued an executive order which narrowed the time frame for people to get petitions so they could get on the ballot. Miss Boylan was very unhappy about this and felt that that had been directed at her. And she sent 2 threatening messages to members of the governor's staff. One of them said, quote, absolutely not helpful. Please relay that while we are okay. I see what the point is here. And I'll find ways to respond. Life is long, and so is my memory, and so are my resources. Her second message, absolutely not helpful, specific response to a tragedy, but please relay that while we are okay. I see what the point is here, and I will try to find ways to respond to the message. The future is coming after. I will leave the expletive out. Miss Boylan was unhappy that the governor wouldn't support her in her campaign. She blamed the governor's office and sent these threatening texts promising retribution. And sure enough, come December, 2 weeks after announcing her campaign, she did a series of tweets and talked about why she left the chamber. She was not honest about the circumstances of her departure. And so 3 memos were released because a public figure running a political campaign was making statements misleading the public about what had happened and why she left. And the chamber felt the duty to correct that record. There were also witnesses that the Attorney General's investigators interviewed that told them that Lindsay Boylan was not to be trusted and that they did not find her credible, not just based on what had happened in the tweets, but based on their professional interactions with her when she worked in the chamber. The investigators didn't include that in the report, and they credited Ms. Boylan wholesale. What perhaps I think was most bothersome, and there was a lot, but out of interviewing 179 witnesses, the investigators made a choice not to include what a lot of people had to say. And buried at the end, at page 121, is a sentence that should scare everybody. Scare everybody if you're being accused of something. And this is all you get about what people have to say that's good about you. Here's what it said. It said a number of former and current executive chamber staff, particularly the senior staff, as well as state troopers with the protection detail, denied having witnessed or experienced any conduct by the governor that could be characterized as sexual or otherwise inappropriate. That sentence is buried at the end, and of the over 1,000 footnotes, why didn't they cite the transcripts? Why didn't they quote from those people? Did what those people have to say bear upon any of the allegations that they included? The governor deserved to have a fulsome and balanced report that laid it all out. But the report doesn't identify who the witnesses were, what they said, and what they were asked. I want to talk also about Trooper number 1. The report does corroborate that the governor supported Trooper 1's transfer to his detail to increase diversity among the detail members. Please read that portion of the report at page 35, because when you read the narrative of the report, it makes it sound as though he wanted this trooper on his detail to sexually harass her, and that just was not true. There is another member of the state police that corroborated that the governor was very interested, out of a detail of 60 troopers who were mostly white male, to have diversity. The governor has great respect for Trooper 1, and he didn't touch her in a sexual manner. None of his contact with Trooper 1, or for that matter, any of the troopers, was meant in any way to be inappropriate. He does greet them. He will pat them on the back. He will pat them on the side when they're opening the doors for him coming in and out of cars. On the elevator, the trooper stands in front of him. The governor will tap the trooper on the back and say hello, particularly as he's walking out of the elevator. He has read what Trooper 1 had to say, and he feels very badly, and he apologizes for anything that he did that caused her to feel that way. He is sorry. With respect to Charlotte Bennett, the governor addressed in detail in his video statement on August 3rd. It is important to know that any claim that he was grooming this young woman who is a sexual assault victim, or the added romantic interest in her, could not be further from the truth. His experience with a very, very close family member who is about the same age as Charlotte Bennett That provided crucial context to the conversations that he had with Ms. Bennett. The governor testified in detail about this to the Attorney General's investigators, but they did not include his detailed testimony in the report. He has and he continues to apologize to Ms. Bennett for anything that he said in the conversations that he had with her that made her feel the way that she did. He certainly did not mean that, and because of her experience and what he went through with someone very close to him, he in no way, shape, or form wanted to hurt her. There are now other series of allegations that were in the report, and the media keeps saying 11 women, 11 women. And I watched CBS This Morning yesterday, and I thought it was actually a good interview of Ms. Camiso. I thought the interviewer was fair. But what was bothersome to me afterwards is they then had a roundtable discussion with two of the men sitting there, and they just kept pointing to 11 women. And it was quite clear to me that they didn't know what the actual claims were. And then it just gets repeated over and over again by the media when they haven't done their homework, rolled up the sleeves, and learned the facts. That's what journalists are supposed to do. Not cast judgment and not give us their opinions. Let's talk about some of the other allegations. State entity employee number 2. This is what the Attorney General's report included as another form of sexual harassment by the governor. This event, this photo. The governor made a joke to the doctor in the hospital gown, protected against COVID while she gave him a test. And he said in front of the whole world, "You make that gown look good." That's not sexual harassment. I don't know why that was included in the Attorney General's report, except to say it was to add another number and to make the governor look bad. There was also state entity employee number 1. And what she claimed is that she was at an event with the governor. And as her photo was being taken, the governor was standing between herself and her supervisor, she claims that the governor touched her butt at the public event while the photo was taken. No pictures from that event were included in the Attorney General's report. And presumably this picture is there, and we haven't been provided with that picture. If the governor may have touched her rear end while he's got his arm around the supervisor and this woman at a public event, he certainly did not mean to do it in a way that was sexual. He takes thousands of pictures. And then it goes to another one of the women who have come forward, Miss Leah Mietis. She is not a state employee. She works for an energy company. The governor was at a public event, and he was working a grope line. There were dozens of people there. There were reporters. And she claims that as he went through the rope line, he touched the logo on her shirt, which was her energy company logo, as he was greeting her. The governor did not mean to grope her. And certainly there were pictures from this event. Those pictures haven't been provided to me, and they were not part of the Attorney General's report. But this particular instance, to say that the governor would try to grope somebody working a rope line with cameras around, he certainly would never have intended to do that. And I don't mean to take away from how this woman felt, but we do need to think about qualitatively what each of the women are saying and whether these are the types of things that are impeachable offenses. There is another allegation, and it was by Anna Liss. And it's on the report. It starts at page 82. And she talks about being at a party and that the governor sought her out. He kissed her and then put his arm around her and took this photo. That's the photo. And that photo is included in the report as evidence of some type of sexual harassment, because Ms. Liss then later talks about how she was uncomfortable when she thought about this photo later on, that the governor had put his arm around her, and then she talked about her experience working with him. And the governor has said, yes, he has called people darling and sweetheart. He has had to change with the times. Yes, he hugs and he kisses his staffers. He has had to change with the times. And as he said on August 3rd, after the Attorney General's report, that he slips, and he does. But this does not rise to the level of sexual harassment or groping or fondling, as has been portrayed in the press during the feeding frenzy of the last 8 days. There is then Alyssa McGrath. And this photo was included as part of the Attorney General's report. It's a photo of the governor at a holiday party, and Miss McGrath is wearing the black, and Brittany Camiso is on the other side. And how the report portrayed this photograph is that the governor put his hands around the rib cage just below their breasts, as though there was something wrong with this photo. And I just simply ask everybody to look at this. Is this something that you think is evidence of improper behavior by the governor? Yes, he joked with Miss Camiso and Miss McGrath. Yes, he would hug them, as he does many of his staffers, and yes, he would give them a kiss. The governor has said over and over he did not grope, he did not fondle. He understood his relationship with them to actually be what's reflected in the photo, that they liked him very much. And he did not have a sense that either of them was uncomfortable with him. There has also been made much about the selfie picture with Miss Camiso. I was asked about it yesterday on CNN by Erica Hill. What Miss Camiso alleged is that on December 31st of 2019, New Year's Eve, she was at the mansion, and she claims that the governor wanted to take a selfie. What the governor told the Attorney General's office is that no, he actually remembers this, and he said, Miss Camiso asked me if she could take a selfie with me. And what Miss Camiso is now saying is that when she took the selfie, that the governor put his hand on her butt and rubbed it for at least 5 seconds. That's what she testified to. And that she was so nervous that it became blurry, the pictures, and she had to delete them. And so they moved and sat on a couch and then took this selfie instead. I'm not going to say any more than that. For me, as a lawyer, as a former prosecutor and a former defense lawyer, I often use pictures as exhibits at trial. The governor did not violate Brittany Camiso. He did not rub her rear end before this photo. She asked for a selfie with him. I think that this picture demonstrates a comfort level in someone who wanted a selfie with the governor. And she sent this selfie to her friend, and there is a footnote. Her friend, her very good friend, Alyssa McGrath, who actually said, "I'm so jealous of the picture." Then we go to this photograph, and this is also included amongst one of the 11. This was at a wedding. The governor officiated the wedding of one of his staffers. And at the wedding, he greeted this young woman, Anna Ruch, and he did put his arms around her hands around her face. He asked her if he could give her a kiss. That is something that he does. And she clearly was not comfortable with that. He understands that. He particularly understands it when he saw this photo on the front page of the New York Times. This does not rise to the level of sexual harassment that we impeach a sitting governor. I want to talk about Caitlin. She met the governor at a reception that was sponsored or hosted by a lobbying firm. She was recommended, he was told she was a superstar. He met her at the reception, and in front of dozens of people, he joked with her. He did a dance pose. He meant no disrespect. He was thinking, you can say whether it's right or whether it's wrong, that this was fun and that he was trying to be playful. And as we now know, it doesn't always work out that way. And the governor knows that and appreciates that. And during the time that she worked for him, he did banter with her. He did ask her about her life. That is something he routinely does with his staff members. What's going on? Are you married? Do you have kids? Are you dating anybody? That's something Senator Schumer asks his staff. It's normal when you're working closely with people in political environments that are high pressure to learn about their lives. He did not mean to make her feel uncomfortable. He does the same thing with the men that work with him. He hugs them, he kisses them, and a number of them testified to that. But the investigators didn't include any of that in the report. And he asked the men about their personal lives. Didn't include any of that in the report. What happened was that from day one, it became building a case against Governor Andrew Cuomo. They started with a presumption that he had done some terrible things. And it went from there. It didn't become scrutinizing each one of the allegations, talking to everybody about what the environment was in chamber. And the governor has said and has no doubt that working for him is tough. I think people will say that going back to his time at HUD. In political environments dealing with serious issues, you want to get the best out of people. Tempers can flare. There's high demands on getting it right. But what happened here was this investigation took every possible negative thing that could be said about the governor and they put it in. And they disregarded the positive, the things that would balance it, and the things that would undermine what some people were saying about the governor. And that's not right. The two investigators that were charged with this report, certainly, and it comes through when you read it, they brought their own biases and a predisposition to this investigation and in the manner in which the report was written. Mr. Kim is a longtime former federal prosecutor in the Southern District, my old office. Mr. Kim had pursued and supervised criminal investigations against the governor for years at that office. And he actually personally interviewed him, personally interviewed Governor Cuomo in one of the criminal investigations. Of course he brought to the table certain views about the governor, feelings he had about how the chamber operated. How could he not? And with respect to Ms. Clark, as an attorney, her practice is focused on bringing sexual harassment and discrimination lawsuits on behalf of employees. Of course that colored how she viewed what complainants told her versus what other people told her. She could not. That was the lens they brought to the case, and those backgrounds certainly influenced how they went about the investigation and drafted this report. But what we do know is that report got facts wrong. It omitted favorable evidence that didn't support the narrative. There were 179 witness interviews, and they only transcribed, where we get the actual Q&As, 41. So what did the other 138 say? Because there are not 179 people mentioned in that report. So here's where we are. Because of what has happened since August 3rd, with the press conference and a report that there's no question in my mind was designed and meant to devastate Governor Cuomo and his chamber. And for the last 8 days, it has been a pile-on, with people judging facts when they didn't have all the facts. And as we sit here today, the investigators have not provided me, the lawyer for the governor, who is being asked to give a submission to the assembly, a single transcript to allow him to respond. They haven't even given him his own. They have not responded to my letter of last week asking to get access to the evidence. And I'm willing to do it under an agreement that protects confidentiality. This is commonly done in civil matters and in criminal matters. The Assembly Judiciary Committee and the Attorney General's office have not agreed to our request for access to the evidence. And we're being asked to make a submission on behalf of the governor of the state of New York by Friday, addressing the allegations. How are we going to be able to do that in a fair and meaningful way? This hasn't been, and it's not going to be, a fair process. And in fact, the governor has been given no process. I think that women should be believed, and they should be treated fairly. I also believe that men should be believed and treated fairly. All people should be given that. And everybody should have a chance to respond. And everybody should be scrutinized with what they say by facts, context, and evidence. That hasn't happened here. Our country has a rule of law. I believe in the rule of law. Not mob mentality and not media mentality. The governor deserves to be treated fairly, and that did not happen here. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your time.
begin by thanking Rita Glavin for that powerful presentation. I'd like to address several issues today. First, I've always started by telling New Yorkers the facts before my opinion. So let's start New York tough with the truth. The Attorney General did a report on complaints made against me by certain women for my conduct. The report said I sexually harassed 11 women. That was the headline people heard and saw and reacted to. The reaction was outrage. It should have been. However, it was also false. My lawyers, as you just heard from Rita Glavin, have reviewed the report over the past several days and have already raised serious issues and flaws that should concern all New Yorkers. Because when there is a bias or a lack of fairness in the justice system, it is a concern for everyone, not just those immediately affected. The most serious allegations made against me had no credible factual basis in the report. And there is a difference between alleged improper conduct and concluding sexual harassment. Now, don't get me wrong. This is not to say that there are not 11 women who I truly offended. There are. And for that, I deeply, deeply apologize. I thought a hug and putting my arm around a staff person while taking a picture was friendly, but she found it to be too forward. I kissed a woman on the cheek at a wedding, and I thought I was being nice, but she felt that it was too aggressive. I have slipped and called people honey, sweetheart, and darling. I meant it to be endearing, but women found it dated and offensive. I said on national TV to a doctor wearing PPE and giving me a COVID nasal swab, "You make that gown look good." I was joking. Obviously, otherwise I wouldn't have said it on national TV. But she found it disrespectful. I take full responsibility for my actions. I have been too familiar with people. My sense of humor can be insensitive and off-putting. I do hug and kiss people casually, women and men. I have done it all my life. It's who I've been since I can remember. In my mind, I've never crossed the line with anyone. But I didn't realize the extent to which the line has been redrawn. There are generational and cultural shifts that I just didn't fully appreciate. And I should have. No excuses. The report did bring to light a matter that I was not aware of and that I would like to address. A female trooper relayed a concern that she found disturbing, and so do I. Please let me provide some context. The governor's trooper detail had about 65 troopers on it. But of the 65, only 6 women and 9 black troopers. I'm very proud of the diversity of my administration. It's more diverse than any administration in history. And I'm very proud of the fact that I have more women in senior positions than any governor before me. The lack of diversity on the state police detail was an ongoing disappointment for me. In many ways, the governor's detail is the face of state government that people see. When I attend an event, people see the detail that's with me. I was continuously trying to recruit more to diversify. On one occasion, I met 2 female troopers who were on duty at an event. Both seemed competent and impressive, and I asked the state police to see if they were interested in joining. I often meet people, men and women, and if they show promise I refer them to be interviewed. The state police handled the interviewing and the hiring, and one of the two troopers eventually joined the detail. I got to know her over time, and she's a great professional. And I would sometimes banter with her when we were in the car. We spent a lot of time driving around the state. This female trooper was getting married, and I made some jokes about the negative consequences of married life. I meant it to be humorous. She was offended, and she was right. The trooper also said that in an elevator I touched her back, and when I was walking past her in a doorway, I touched her stomach. Now, I don't recall doing it, but if she said I did it, I believe her. At public events, troopers will often hold doors open or guard the doorways. When I walk past them, I often will give them a grip of the arm, a pat on the face, a touch on the stomach, a slap on the back. It's my way of saying, I see you, I appreciate you, and I thank you. I'm not comfortable just walking past and ignoring them. Of course, usually they are male troopers. In this case, I don't remember doing it at all. I didn't do it consciously with the female trooper. I did not mean any sexual connotation. I did not mean any intimacy by it. I just wasn't thinking. It was totally thoughtless in the literal sense of the word, but it was also insensitive. It was embarrassing to her, and it was disrespectful. It was a mistake. Plain and simple. I have no other words to explain it. I want to personally apologize to her and her family. I have the greatest respect for her and for the New York State Police. Now, obviously in a highly political matter like this, there are many agendas and there are many motivations at play. If anyone thought otherwise, they would be naive, and New Yorkers are not naive. But I want to thank the women who came forward with sincere complaints. It's not easy to step forward, but you did an important service. And you taught me, and you taught others an important lesson. Personal boundaries must be expanded and must be protected. I accept full responsibility. Part of being New York tough is being New York smart. New York smart tells us that this situation and moment are not about the facts. It's not about the truth. It's not about thoughtful analysis. It's not about how do we make the system better. This is about politics. And our political system today is too often driven by the extremes. Rashness has replaced reasonableness. Loudness has replaced soundness. Twitter has become the public square for policy debate. There is an intelligent discussion to be had on gender-based actions, on generational and cultural behavioral differences, on setting higher standards, and finding reasonable resolutions. But the political environment is too hot, and it is too reactionary for that now. And it is unfortunate. Now, you know me. I'm a New Yorker, born and bred. I am a fighter. And my instinct is to fight through this controversy because I truly believe it is politically motivated. I believe it is unfair and it is untruthful. And I believe it demonizes behavior that is unsustainable for society. If I could communicate the facts through the frenzy, New Yorkers would understand. I believe that. But when I took my oath as governor, then it changed. I became a fighter, but I became a fighter for you. And it is your best interest that I must serve. This situation, by its current trajectory, will generate months of political and legal controversy. That is what is going to happen. That is how the political wind is blowing. It will consume government. It will cost taxpayers millions of dollars. It will brutalize people. The State Assembly yesterday outlined weeks of process that will then lead to months of litigation. Time and money that government should spend managing COVID, guarding against the Delta variant, reopening upstate, fighting gun violence, and saving New York City. All that time would be wasted. This is one of the most challenging times for government in a generation. Government really needs to function today. Government needs to perform. It is a matter of life and death, government operations. And wasting energy on distractions is the last thing that state government should be doing. And I cannot be the cause of that. New York tough means New York loving. And I love New York. And I love you. And everything I have ever done has been motivated by that love. And I would never want to be unhelpful in any way. And I think that given the circumstances, the best way I can help now is if I step aside and let government get back to governing. And therefore, that's what I'll do, because I work for you. And doing the right thing is doing the right thing for you. Because as we say, it's not about me, it's about we. Kathy Hochul, my lieutenant governor, is smart and competent. This transition must be seamless. We have a lot going on. I'm very worried about the Delta variant, and so should you be. But she can come up to speed quickly, and my resignation will be effective in 14 days. To my team, Melissa DeRosa, Robert Mejica, Beth Garvey, Stephanie Benton, Dana Caratanudo, Kelly Cummings, Rich Azzopardi, Howard Zucker, Rick Cotton, Jan O'Leary, Dana Caratanudo, Kelly Cummings, Rich Azzopardi, Howard Zucker, Rick Cotton, Jan O'Leary, Jack Davies, and the hundreds of dedicated administration officials. I want to say this. Thank you. Thank you. And be proud. We made New York State the progressive capital of the nation. No other state government accomplished more to help people. And that is what it's all about. Just think about what we did. We passed marriage equality, creating a new civil right, legalized love for the LGBTQ community, and we generated a force for change that swept the nation. We passed the SAFE Act years ago, the smartest gun safety law in the United States of America, and it banned the madness of assault weapons. We've saved countless lives with that law. $15 minimum wage, the highest minimum wage in the nation, lifting millions of families' standard of living, putting more food on the table and clothes on their backs. And we led the nation in economic justice with that reform.
Good day. We're coming on the air because Andrew Cuomo, the embattled governor of New York, is still speaking to his state and has just announced that he intends to step down. He explained his reasons just a moment ago.
And I think that given the circumstances, the best way I can help now is if I step aside and let government get back to governing. And therefore, that's what I'll do. Because I work for you. And doing the right thing is doing the right thing for you. Because as we say, it's not about me, it's about we. Kathy Hochul, my lieutenant governor, is smart and competent. This transition must be seamless. We have a lot going on. I'm very worried about the Delta variant, and so should you be. But she can come up to speed quickly, and my resignation will be effective in 14 days. To my team, Melissa DeRosa, Robert Mahika, Beth Garvey.
After a long statement by his lawyer, Rita Glavin, who said the report that came out last week accusing the governor of sexual harassment was not fair to him. Here's more of what the governor is saying.
This on a personal note. In many ways, I see the world through the eyes of my daughters, Cara, Mariah, and Michaela. They are 26 and 26, twins, and 23. And I have lived this experience with and through them. I have sat on the couch with them, hearing the ugly accusations for weeks. I have seen the look in their eyes and the expression on their faces. And it hurt. I want my three jewels to know this. My greatest goal is for them to have a better future than the generations of women before them. It is still in many ways a man's world. It always has been. We have sexism that is culturalized and institutionalized. My daughters have more talent and natural gifts than I ever had. I want to make sure that society allows them to fly as high as their wings will carry them. There should be no assumptions, no stereotypes, no limitations. I want them to know from the bottom of my heart that I never did and I never would intentionally disrespect a woman or treat any woman differently than I would want them treated. And that is the God's honest truth. Your dad made mistakes, and he apologized, and he learned from it. And that's what life is all about. And I know the political process is flawed, and I understand their cynicism and distrust and disappointment now. But don't give it up, because government is still the best vehicle for making positive social change. Lastly, I want to remind all New Yorkers of an important lesson, and one that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. And that's what you New Yorkers did in battling COVID. The enemy landed in New York State. COVID launched the attack here. It came on planes from Europe, and we had no idea. It was an ambush. And it was up to New Yorkers to fight back. We were on our own, and it was war. Nurses, doctors, essential workers became our frontline heroes. Hospitals became the battlegrounds. Streets were still, and sirens filled the city's silence. Trailers carried the bodies of our fallen brothers and sisters. But you refused to give up, and you fought back, and you won, going from the highest infection rate in the nation to one of the lowest. No one thought we could do it, but you did it. You led the nation, and you showed the way forward. And how you did it is what's most important. You did it together, not as black New Yorkers or white New Yorkers, not as LGBTQ New Yorkers or straight New Yorkers or Democrats or Republicans or upstate or downstate or Jewish, Muslim, Protestant or Catholic New Yorkers, but as one community, one family, the family of New York. You overcame the naysayers and the haters and the fear and the division, and you unified and you rose and you overcame and you saved lives. And that was powerful in its effect. It was beautiful to see, and it was an honor to lead. Please remember that lesson. Hold it dear and hold it up high for this nation to see, because it is New York State at her finest, creating her legacy, fulfilling her destiny, giving life and animation to the lady in the harbor, saying, Excelsior, we can be better, we can reach higher, and proclaiming E pluribus unum, out of many one, unity, community, love. That is our founding premise and our enduring promise. And that is the salvation of this nation that it so desperately needs to hear. Thank you for the honor of serving you. It has been the honor of my lifetime. God bless you.
Governor Cuomo's bombshell announcement came after nearly an hour of defense, first from his lawyer, Rita Glavin, who said the report that came out last week accusing the governor of sexual harassment was unfair, didn't include witnesses who discredited some of the allegations, did not include his answers, and treated some of these statements as sexual misconduct or sexual harassment when they were simply innocent gestures on the part of the governor, which was a theme that he began his statement by repeating. He said there were not 11 cases of sexual harassment. There are 11 women that I offended, and I apologized. I've been too familiar with people. I hug and kiss men and women, but I didn't realize how the lines have been withdrawn. And he said the attacks were driven by politics, that his instinct was to fight them, but that would not be in the best interest of the state. NBC's Kathy Parks is outside the State House in Albany. Kathy, did they see this coming?
Pete, good afternoon to you. I think this is a shock that is affecting everyone here in Albany. Just moments after the announcement was made, there were a couple of people here in front of the State House who were clapping.
First,
so
I've
obviously
always
there was mounting pressure for the governor to step down. I do want to point out that this announcement comes exactly 1 week after the release of that explosive AG report where several women came forward to investigators alleging sexual
The report said I sexually
by
harassed
the governor, and this
women.
comes also just a day after the Judiciary Committee began impeachment proceedings. We thought this was going to be a lengthy process. We were given a timeline yesterday. We were told that it was going to take weeks for all of the documents from the AG's office, as well as Governor Cuomo, to submit. He had a deadline for Friday to submit this, but now we have this bombshell announcement saying that he will be stepping aside. He said that he had to do this because it will likely be a distraction for New Yorkers. It will also cost New Yorkers millions of dollars. And Pete, I do want to point out that this is extremely significant because this hasn't happened for the state of New York in over 100 years. So what happens next? So we are following this closely. We understand that Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul will be moving in once the proceedings move forward. You heard from Governor Cuomo just a few minutes ago saying that this will be effective in 14 days. But Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul will be stepping in the interim, and then we'll be going from there and monitoring what happens next, Pete.
Thanks, Kathy. Kelly O'Donnell now is at the White House standing by. Of course, President Biden had been among those urging him to step down. Kelly?
Well, what is so notable, Pete, is the governor of New York choosing this particular day and even this hour to make this announcement. Yes, there had been calls from President Biden and from almost every top Democrat in the country, including Chuck Schumer, who is the leader of the Senate, of course, a Democrat of New York, as well as Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. But they have just had what is arguably the most significant political victory of President Biden's time in office, and Governor Cuomo using the power of his own newsmaking ability to squash that in the moment. That bipartisan infrastructure deal just passed in the last hour. The White House preparing to note that, celebrate it, with more work still to be done on the House side, to be sure. But after calls for resignation from the president, who had been a longtime ally of Andrew Cuomo, both being in public life for the last 4 decades, picking this moment and this day is significant and certainly changes the trajectory of the White House plans for the day. We don't have an official announcement yet. What we can tell you is in the West Wing offices, there were aides huddled watching the announcement. We have reached out to senior officials to find out if there had been any heads up given to the White House. There had not been any conversations between President Biden and Andrew Cuomo since this official report by the New York Attorney General became public. There were many times when they were asked if there had been any direct White House Albany communication, and we were told that had not been the case. And certainly this is a day for Andrew Cuomo's farewell speech to New York that we just saw. He'll remain in office for 14 more days, as he explained. Effectively steps on the biggest political news for the Biden White House in quite some time, and that is that bipartisan infrastructure package. We'll see how the president responds in the East Room this afternoon when he and the vice president are scheduled to speak about their own legislative achievement. Clearly, questions about Andrew Cuomo will now be part of the news of the day. Pete?
Kelly, thank you. I want to bring in Danny Savalos, NBC News legal analyst. Danny, the president or the governor said basically this is a political decision, that he didn't want to fight it for political reasons. But what legal problems does he still have?
A number. For example, he faces potential civil liability, assuming statutes of limitations have not expired. He does face potential criminal liability, and then he would also face the possibility of impeachment, which looks cosmetically like a trial, but is really a political event. And in New York, it has the added curiosity of the Senate sitting in judgment of him, along with the 7 justices of the Court of Appeals.
Danny, what about the case that the governor's lawyer made earlier today, that she thought that the report that came out, A, has been mischaracterized in some of the public reporting about it, but B, that it was weak, that it was basically a report in search of a conclusion and wasn't fair to him?
Ms. Glavin does make the important point that this report is thorough. It may be produced by able counsel, but it's not a report that's been subjected to the adversarial system. It has not been subjected, or the witnesses have not been subjected to the crucible of cross-examination. It's a report that was prepared and then just put out there into the ether. And for that reason, Glavin pointed out, I think effectively on Friday, that that prosecutors should be careful and not adopt it wholesale, because Ms. Glavin put, for example, their own alternate timeline where they conducted their own investigation, and they gave the defense team, or I should say Cuomo's attorneys, gave a glimpse, a preview of what it would look like if a prosecutor were to roll the dice and take a chance in prosecuting Andrew Cuomo. You may believe every word in the report issued by the AG's office, but once it goes through the adversarial process and witnesses are cross-examined, that's where you find out if this is a case a prosecutor can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And that is the standard prosecutors are bound to ethically. They must believe they can prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt, not just that they can get an indictment and take a chance at trial.
And of course, it's well to remember that this report was actually requested by the governor. NBC News' Chuck Todd is standing by now. Chuck, this is a bombshell. Are you surprised?
I'm surprised it came this quickly. I'm not surprised that this is the ultimate result. Pete, I had talked to some folks very close to the governor last week who said, look, he's not in a place for resignation right now, but he will be. And the reason that this person felt confident that he'd get there, Pete, is simply the long game here. If he went through, if he forced an impeachment process, number one, he'd have He's going to have to deal with the various, perhaps drip of criminal exposure, as you've been talking about here, whether it's with the Albany Sheriff's Department or wherever. But with impeachment came a permanent ban on ever holding office. This is a person who's never known anything else in his life than elective politics, whether working for his father or eventually running for office himself. He believes there is another day for him someday. He's going to eternally believe this. Had he gone through the impeachment process, he'd have been permanently barred. A Cuomo not being able to run for dog catcher, anything, that's not something he was going to be comfortable with. So I'm surprised how quickly he came to this conclusion. Not surprised, according to people that I've been talking to close to him, that ultimately this is where he landed.
So when you say with impeachment came disqualification, you mean like in the federal system, impeachment first, but upon conviction they could separately vote to bar him from office?
New York State had basically a similar punishment where he would not be able to hold any office in New York State had he been convicted in an impeachment trial. So in the same, that was obviously something that was thought about with the second Trump impeachment trial. That was something that his people thought could be a way to convince him to resign.
All right, Chuck Todd, thank you very much. Andrew Cuomo stepping down after serving 3 terms as governor, soon to be succeeded by New York's first female governor. More on this throughout the day on MSNBC and tonight on NBC Nightly News. For now, I'm Pete Williams, NBC News.
Hi there, everyone. Thank
of his briefing, he was discrediting some of the allegations in the AG report, specifically going through some of the allegations, defending himself, essentially saying sometimes he calls people sweetheart. He's trying to be endearing, but some people find that offensive. And he said that while he does dispute some of the allegations, some of the more serious allegations in the AG report, he did apologize that there are 11 women that he offended. But then he went into the fact that he doesn't want to distract from state business. He said things are looking right now that we are going into a 2 months long, drawn out process of impeachment. And he's right. We've been speaking with assembly members here at the Capitol, and none of them, Democrat or Republican, tell us anybody that they knew who were standing by his side. And so we knew that he had a deadline on Friday to submit items to the Judiciary Committee here in his defense, and then they would go ahead and continue on with the impeachment process. They wanted to move swiftly with this. But now we know instead the governor is stepping down, effective in 14 days, Morgan.
And Lindsay, let's just back up here for a moment, because he effectively called this a political hit. He effectively said that this was politically motivated, the allegations against him, said that Twitter has now become the public square. And it's because of that untenable political pressure that he is stepping down. But also his attorney just held a virtual news conference before he himself delivered his resignation. What was she saying?
Yeah, I mean, Morgan, to your first point, he has said that, and his attorney have stated that he hasn't gotten fair due process. But I spoke with a member of the Judiciary Committee this morning, and he said the governor has gotten more due process than every average citizen would get. He has an arsenal of attorneys at his disposal. He can obviously address the press and take questions at any time. He has not been taking questions from the press since the AG report came out. But his attorney spent the first 45 minutes really discrediting the women in this report, essentially saying that the AG report has critical omissions of key evidence, got some facts wrong, also says accuses one of the accusers of witness tampering and goes on to really poke holes, especially in Brittany Camisso's allegation. She was the one who just spoke to CBS News this week. She alleges that the governor put his hand under her shirt at the governor's mansion in November of 2020. And Glavin, Cuomo's attorney, in that press conference said that the AG report didn't bother to look at the logs of who had been at the mansion that day, didn't interview other people who were at the mansion that day. But as my colleague Tom Winter has pointed out, yes, while Cuomo and his attorney, they have access to the AG report that we've all seen now, they don't have access to those underlying transcripts. And so, yes, the governor is resigning. That is the headline here, but they definitely spent the first hour trying to discredit the women in this report, Morgan.
And speaking of those women, I mean, Lindsay, let's be frank here. A lot of people have criticized how the governor has handled these allegations and how he has personalized these allegations. For example, in an earlier press conference, a lot of people were reacting to the way in which he sort of apologized, but also showed pictures of him touching the faces of various women, saying this is sort of normal procedure for me in case someone had a problem with it. And then he said in another press conference that someone in his family had been harmed by sexual abuse and that he would never do such a thing. So when he also brought his daughters up today and the personal toll this has taken on his family, what did he say?
He said that he wants his daughters to grow up in a world in which women are essentially, it's not a man's world. And of course, Cuomo has been accused of being a part of an old boys club order. But Morgan, you're mentioning kind of a trend that we've been seeing here with the governor, and that is he is spending time trying to attack some of these accusers, but then also completely pivoting. Again, in the press conference today, we heard the governor talking about the fact that this is a political witch hunt. And then he talked about the fact that he really praised New Yorkers for getting out of COVID. And so it really was his swan song today that was covering a myriad of things that he hopes to be a part of his positive legacy, but of course also, once again, spending a good bulk of that really discrediting the credibility of some of the accusers. All
right, Lindsay Reiser there for us in Albany. Lindsay, thank you for being there. And joining us now in Cynthia Oxney. She's a former federal prosecutor as well as an NBC News legal contributor. First off, Cynthia, just give me your big picture thoughts about what you just heard from Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Well, my general attitude is he was arrogant and unapologetic. I mean, if he really cared about these women and this situation and his daughters, he would have come out with some grace and apologized and been enough of it. But instead, he sent his lawyer out for 45 minutes to attack each and every woman, and even to attack the lawyers who investigated the case in kind of a weird attack, too, because one of the lawyers supposedly has been investigating him for a long time on criminal matters from the U.S. Attorney's Office. And so she said, well, he obviously knew too much about the lawyer and must have brought that bias with him, which is really kind of odd because it's like saying, well, he doesn't like him because he knows he's been doing criminal things. So it was kind of an odd defense. But generally, my attitude, it was arrogant and selfish for him to attack these victims for 45 minutes, one after the other, and then to, almost tear up about what a great job he'd done in COVID, and then say, but he was doing it all for the people of New York. Don't kid yourself. He's not doing it for the people of New York. He's doing it because he's in a bind, because all of these women have come after him, because he has been a bully, and it's about time that he's going to reap what he has sown. That's why he's doing it. He's not doing it for the people of New York. He's doing it for Andrew Cuomo. And he doesn't fool anybody for 1 minute, especially me.
Well, you say he doesn't fool anyone, but let's be real. I mean, this has been quite a fall from grace. I mean, a year ago, every New Yorker was tuning in to his daily briefings about COVID, and people were tweeting Cuomo for president. So this is a pretty dramatic sense of whiplash, within 12 months. But despite his resignation, Cynthia, Cuomo is still facing legal challenges. So now does this resignation impact those challenges?
Well, it certainly impacts the impeachment, but he has sexual harassment allegations and civil cases that it may or may not affect, because it may be that the victims in these cases think, okay, enough is enough. He's paid the price, and that will be a decision they make on whether or not they sue him civilly. I think it will also have an effect on the criminal case. My general attitude is about the criminal case that was filed, that while righteous as a forcible touching, it really is not the right place to be in the criminal system. There are a lot of very serious cases that need the focus of the lawyers in the criminal system and the resources of the criminal system and the hours. And I think this is best handled civilly. So it will be up to the victims to make a decision, and I'm sure they're making decisions right now.
And Cynthia, you talk about, quote unquote, paying the price. Did Cuomo, in your professional opinion, say anything incriminating today? I mean, he said several times in his statement that he did take certain actions, but they were not intended to actually be offensive. So how does that play into any potential defense in another trial?
Well, he did say it was generational. He admitted he had done the kissing and but he didn't ever admit that he did anything in a sexual manner. So I don't think his statement today, outside of just being arrogant, affects the lawsuits.
But Cynthia, I mean, what was significant when we sort of play back the tape here? What was significant about the latest allegation from Cuomo's former executive assistant? I mean, was it that allegation, you think, that tipped the scales?
I don't think so. I think it was a forest and a trees situation. I think this was a forest of allegations, and his lawyers went after this tree as a bad branch, and this tree has, a broken something or other, and they went after it individually. But you can't really look at this case individually because there are so many women. And the other thing is there's just a general, not only the women, but also the retaliation and generally the bullying that was coming out of his office, that all of that is coming home to roost. Ronan Farrow has a new article about the bullying that had to do with the shutting down of a commission, him calling the Obama White House. He was sort of famous for being a bully when he was at HUD.
Cynthia, I think we lost your connection there virtually. That was Cynthia Oxney for us, and we thank her for her professional expertise. Let's go now to NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams, who joins us now. Pete, thanks so much for being with us, and thank you for your special report just there on NBC News Network. Can you explain to us now how this resignation affects the impeachment trial? Because we know that New York State Assembly was accelerating its inquiry into whether or not Cuomo should be impeached at the time that he offered this resignation.
Well, remember that impeachment is a political punishment. It's not a legal one. And the only thing that you can do with impeachment is, if you impeach someone and then convict them, is remove them from office. And if you do that, potentially disqualify them from holding future office. So if he steps down, that short circuits the impeachment process. It becomes a nullity. It's not going to happen. And that's clearly the reason why the governor, I say clearly, that would seem to be the big reason the governor has decided to step down instead of face what appeared to be almost certain impeachment and possibly certain conviction. He had very few defenders left in the State House in Albany, the state legislature, that would vote on it. So he seemed to be accepting the inevitable. What was so surprising about the announcement today is that it followed over an hour of defense, first from his lawyer, Rita Glavin, who attacked the report that came out last week, saying that it was not an independent review, that it was about building a case. She said it seemed to ignore witnesses or emails or other documentary evidence that would go against the claims by some of these women. It didn't include witnesses who would discredit their allegations, she said. It suggested that at least one accuser spoke up because she was unhappy with the governor's policy decisions, that it didn't include any of Governor Cuomo's responses, and that some of these sexual allegations didn't, some of these allegations didn't rise to the level of sexual harassment. And the governor himself began his own statement with a similar tone, saying, I did not sexually harass 11 women. There are 11 women I offended, and I apologize. He said, I admit I've been too familiar with people. I've hugged and kissed both men and women. but I didn't realize how the line had been withdrawn. I was wrong. But then he said the attacks on him were driven not by the facts, but by politics, that his instinct was to fight them for political purposes, to fight back politically. But he said that would just generate months of controversy at a delicate time for the state when it needs the undivided attention of its state government. And for that reason, he said he was stepping down.
I appreciate that distinction you're making, Pete, between what is political punishment versus legal punishment. But to the latter, what is still on the table legally? What could be next for Cuomo legally?
Well, so the one thing is this possibility of civil lawsuits filed by his accusers. They could sue him civilly. And as you were just discussing a moment ago, will some of his accusers now say, you know what, I think the fact that he stepped down, that's it for me. I don't need to see him punished further by the legal process. The criminal exposure still exists, and you had several district attorneys saying that they are going to look at these allegations with the possibility of bringing criminal charges. Now, they would be state criminal charges, basically assault, that kind of thing. No possibility of federal criminal violations here because they're just not federal crimes. The allegations, even if accepted as true, are not federal crimes. You could have sort of workplace discrimination lawsuits in the federal system, and that's a multi-step process. You have to go to the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission and get permission to sue. And so there could be claims of workplace discrimination. But I think with him stepping down, that blunts the possible effectiveness of those as well. But he still does face possible criminal exposure if the prosecutors decide to continue to go forward.
All right, Pete Williams for us there in Washington, D.C. Pete, thank you for being on top of the story from beginning to end, and thank you for sharing it with us. Now we are joined by Ben Camisar, Steve writer for the NBC News political unit. Ben, it seems like Cuomo's staying in power simply became politically untenable. So at what point does it seem the political calculation changed? Because frankly, this announcement caught a lot of people off guard today. What was the tipping point?
I'll admit it caught me off guard after watching his lawyer sort of go through accusation by accusation, sort of casting doubts on the different accusers. I went and walked my dog. I thought, OK, there's no way he's going to be doing this right now. Clearly, it changed very quickly. It's not entirely sure what happened. I think what a lot of people are pointing to is, you know, he has no allies in New York. Everyone was saying that they wanted to move forward with his impeachment. Biden was calling on him to leave. There was no one really kind of arguing the other side except for Cuomo's team. At that point, when you know that impeachment is a certainty, and in New York, it's not like the impeachment of President Trump, former President Trump. He was still able to be president during impeachment. In New York, once impeachment happens, he had to step aside and let the lieutenant governor act as governor until the matter settled out. Seeing that he was likely going to be stripped of power, it probably just dawned on him real quick that he's got no allies. He's going to be stripped of power, at least temporarily. This is probably where things are headed, so let's do it myself instead of having it taken from me.
Ben, you say he had no political allies, but were there any high-profile lawmakers who were still publicly supporting him?
I can't think of any off the top of my head. I mean, there were probably, you know, you think of, you know, the Speaker of the House in the Speaker of the Assembly is what they call it in New York. He was moving forward with impeachment. He was getting to be pretty much on an island. And, you know, when you have the leader of the party and Joe Biden calling for your head,
right,
it's a lot to be in.
So, Ben, although what is interesting now is that the Lieutenant Governor, Kathy Hochul, will now become the first female governor in New York State history. What do we know about her?
Yeah, so she actually previously served in the House. She has been she stepped into political limelight in a controversy as well. Basically, she ran for a open congressional seat that was opened after a Republican congressman caught sending a shirtless picture. Said he ended up resigning. And so she stepped into, she served a little bit in Congress and then has pretty well liked in the state, and people had sort of been eyeing her as potentially the next governor before all of this happened. But, you know, now she assumes the governor's mansion and is, you know, it's not just in the right place in the right time, but certainly very, very capable and going to be probably the front runner for the full term when the actual election happens next year.
And professionally, it sounds like she has put in the work. Ben Camisar for us. Ben, thank you so much for being with us. We will continue to follow this breaking story on all the platforms of NBC News. Now, however, let's switch gears. The coronavirus pandemic and the deepening crisis unfolding all across the country. The threat of the Delta variant is getting more dire by the day. In fact, many states are now reporting their highest case count since the start of the pandemic. The number of confirmed cases here in the U.S. now topping 36 million. And just for context, it only took a week for the U.S. to add 1 million cases and less than a month to add 2 million cases and just under 3 months to add 3 million new cases. Meanwhile, Atlanta is emerging now as a COVID hotspot with nearly 15,000 new cases reported there in just the last few days. The emergency room and intensive care unit at the state's largest trauma hospital in Atlanta are now full. Grady Memorial Hospital is actually sending sick patients to other hospitals that are overcrowded as well, which is forcing them to wait for hours just to be seen by a doctor. Meanwhile, the school year in Metro Atlanta is also getting off to a pretty rough start with more than 400 new cases since classes resumed just last week. Some schools are now implementing their own mask policy since the state of Georgia currently does not have one.